En el centro de la pampa vive un pimiento. Sol y viento pa' su vida, sol y viento. Sol y viento pa' su vida, sol y viento.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Patrick Barnard. Bienvenue à la 80e édition du Pimento. Hello, I'm Patrick Barnard. Welcome to the 80th edition of the Pimento Report. Cette vidéo sera en anglais à cause justement de la langue employée par les participants qu'on va entendre dans la vidéo. So this is going to be in English because of the language that the participants of the workshop we're going to visit are going to use. We're here, the Pimento Report is here at the People's Social Forum in Ottawa, August 21 to August 24, 2014. It's an amazing convergence of groups from civil society throughout Canada, all around Quebec, and also from other parts of the world. Today, the Pimento Report is going to visit an atelier, a workshop on the recolonization of the First Nations of Canada now in 2014. The language will be English because that's the language that the people in the workshop are going to use. It's going to be moderated by Geneviève Beaudet, who has involved herself in First Nations issues for a number of years. It's sponsored by the magazine Canadian Dimension and also by Quebec's Nouveau Cahier du Socialisme. And of course it's put together by First Nations groups themselves. So let's go and visit this workshop on the recolonization of First Nations lands.
Since a few years, there seems to be a trend of recolonization where the ancestral indigenous territories are aggressively invaded by extractivists like forest industry, hydroelectricity, of course in Quebec, mining industry, and most of all, petrol. She's the supervisor to the Neecha Ojibway Anishnabe Dupuis and creator of Mohawk with the women movement for unity to bring in teaching of our practices with our children in our communities. So, Shannon, it's your turn.
We were very peaceful people. We did not drink. We did not have all these diseases that our people are struggling with today. The identity crisis that's going on, our people need that respect today. Some of the things that our nation, the Algonquin nation, that are trying to get back at when we think about decolonization, we have to start small steps, and it's going to be gradual. It's not going to be easy to try to get our people back to that mindset of understanding who we really are, to say who we really are as Anishnawbe. When we ask ourselves, what is it to be Algonquin? And I really don't know, because this word Algonquin came from the government when they first put in the Indian Act that separated our people, and this is how they divide and conquer our people. This is where everything that came into the communities, it started changing our beliefs, it started changing our ways, and we don't seem to be free to make decisions for ourselves, to make decisions to where we want to go in life, to make decisions what we want to teach our children today, our language especially. Our language is dying out where we live. There is so much of the influences coming from the Quebec education, the English education. We have to put our children into schools that teach only English and only one classroom of Algonquin, and the rest is always English. Where do our people get a say to teach our children now?
The structure of this workshop on recolonization was greatly aided by a Quebec group called l'Université Populaire d'Été, the Popular Summer University, an initiative promoting outreach that seeks to learn from what people like Shannon Chief have to say.
When someone wants to start something to protect the land, right away, SQ, courts, laws, everything. that really scares our people because we've been living in that colonized society for so many years. And how to start decolonizing our people. My thoughts were to start with our own children. When the children, the generation where my mom and people that age were taken away, forcefully taken away from their homes, telling them, if you do not let me take your child, you will get arrested. That's where it all started off. They started off with our children to assimilate us, to Christianize us, to civilize us. So when we look at how do we go back to where we want to go, to what I call home, how do we start? Our people will have to start with our children, to do the same thing they did to our children. Building schools out in our lands where we can teach nothing but just language, just like they did to our children residential schools. Our people have so much more power to do what is needed to bring back our language. We need to be respected to do this. We cannot be told that you cannot go out and teach your kids out there because you don't have a bachelor's in education, because you don't have a teaching certificate, because you don't have all these things which we were taught today's laws from. So all we could do is just start going back to our lands, start building and occupying and just live. Our own schools, our own freedom to teach culture, language, to hunt, fish. It does not necessarily mean to go back to every old thing that the way they first found us here. There are many ways that we could still live today out in the lands.
Hi, Kwe, Ani, bonjour. I'm from the Anishnawbe territory. I was scooped, adopted, and raised in Ottawa. I was taken at 2 years old, and I was brought to Ottawa, and I was left here. And I made Ottawa my home. I made this society my home, and I lived here all my life. And now, when I turned 18, I returned home. I found my real mom, I found my real dad, I found my real family, I found where I came from. I only wanted to go up there for 3 days because I figured I'd have 3 days to meet my family and come home, but I ended up staying up there for 11 years. I went there for 11 years, but when I was there for 11 years, I found out what Canada was doing to our families, to my relations. I found out about residential school. I thought residential school was a boarding school, and around here in Ottawa, boarding schools it's where the elite goes, where the nuns teach, and it's a private school around here. And to me, when I heard about boarding school, I thought, well, wow, you guys are lucky. I always wanted to go to boarding school, but I never made it. But then an elder, she stood there in front of me, and she raised her dress a little bit, and she showed me the scars that the nuns left her. And that's when it hit me. It hit me that Canada had the rights to take our kids, put them in schools, beat them, molest them, rape them, kill them. And that's when it hit me. That's when I thought that, like there's something going on here. Like, how come I never heard about it, right? But you don't hear nothing in Ottawa. You don't hear nothing. We're so shielded over here that everything over here is pretty and pink. When I went back to the lands where my family's from, they completely clear-cutted the whole entire lands. They went ahead, Bullwater, they changed their name to MBCB Bullwater, and now they changed their name again to Resolute. Same problem, same issue, it continues on. It doesn't matter how many people they put in the ministry's positions. They say we're trying to build a relationship with Canada. It doesn't work because you know what? Every time you build a relationship with these staff that they put at the tables, if you start building a good relationship with these people, they turn around and they take these people and they go transfer them to a different office, so the person that you're dealing with is gone. So now we're still sitting here at the same spot, but we have different people on this side. And then we keep repeating our stories and over. We've been through so many ministers, it's not funny anymore. And we're still being clear cutted, and now we have the ring of fire that happens to, like, you know, they want to develop our lands. My dad passed away 2.5 years ago. You know, I was adopted. I should still have rights to the land, you know, although I was taken away, adopted, and shipped off. And you know what? I fought for my rights. I went home last month, and I told the Anishnawbe Nation chiefs, I said, you know what? I was adopted, but you know what? I'm one of 70,000 children that were taken away in Ontario alone. And now I said, you know what? This is my ancestral territory. This is where my family trapped land. This is where they existed. This is where they fished, they hunt, they gathered. And now they want to build the ring of fire on our territory where my dad's trap line sits on the northward corridor of the ring of fire. So now, how am I going to teach my son how to walk on the land that my ancestors walked on if it's being gutted out, if it's being processed and sent off to China? Because right now the ring of fire is the chromite mining. And it's going to be the next tar sands. It's going to be the next, you know, like environmental destruction of our waterways, like, you know, up in northern Ontario. But down here, they're already publicizing. They're already, you know, offering jobs. You know, like come to northern Ontario. We have training. We have everything for you. But you know what? I never received a letter. I never received an invitation for employment opportunities, for economic development in our own territory. So why are these people in Ottawa and Toronto and all these different, you know, people across Canada being invited to our territory where they can't even acknowledge us, they can't listen to us, they can't even sit with us?
We have a lot of fossil fuel developments, so oil and gas, that are, you know, completely devastating, very, very toxic things that, you know, destroy and pollute communities that live nearby. But more and more we're realizing also threaten our global survival on a long-term level. And at the same time, you know, the treaties, the original agreements between settlers, groups, and First Nations have continued to be unrecognized, and land has continued to be stolen under false pretenses to allow for, you know, a lot of these extraction projects that, you know, the Canadian economy is basically built on to continue. But I think the thing that, you know, I think gets a lot of us is that maybe more people are paying attention now. Maybe more people are seeing this kind of thing on the news, reading about it in the newspaper, seeing it on social media. And so all of a sudden, you know, it seems like we're more aware of this than ever before. And I think that's one of the interesting things about why we're talking about this at this kind of forum now, whereas maybe, you know, 20 and 30 years ago, we wouldn't have, you know, a number of workshops organized by and for Indigenous groups to talk about these kind of issues. I think there's a lot more activism, particularly with younger generations today, or at least doing it in different ways that sort of reflect ways that people are connecting today. Also reflecting better education and better connection between communities as well. Because we're nearly at the end of an era where it's been easy to access resources. Not easy, but, you know, much easier than we're sort of used to seeing today. So we're at the sort of end of an era where mining was, you know, a fairly simple activity where you could get gold, you know, by simply sifting pans through a river. We've gone through an era where we're out of access to very easily available oil. You know, stuff that you can simply stick a straw in the ground and it pops out, or gas, you know, similar means. We now have to resort to sort of extreme methods where, for example, in Alberta, we're resorting to basically mining the ground for oil. You have tar sands out there, which are basically oil mixed with sand, and to get at it, you know, they basically just scrape away the entire land. You have the situation of fracking going on now, and so instead of getting at, you know, natural gas that's, you know, close to the surface of the earth, they have to go in and break the bedrock of the earth and release a lot of toxic chemicals, and release a lot of these kind of really horrible elements back into people's drinking water, back up to the surface of the earth. There's no return to mining without requiring massive tailings ponds, massive amounts of, what they call waste rock, which is often, corrosive, often toxic. You have pipelines being built crisscrossing the entire country to support oil and gas infrastructure. And so you're seeing a tremendous sort of multiplication of the impacts of these projects that, at one point I think we thought, were sort of beneficial to the country. Now we're starting to realize collectively are really destroying all that we have. And we're seeing that, on the front lines of a lot of these issues are Native communities. We're seeing that, First Nations communities, even Métis communities, are the ones being massively impacted, massively displaced by a lot of these projects. And so they've been forced to react, adapt to these new realities, adapt to these different situations, adapt to government regimes that are much more cunning, adapt to companies that are much more brazen and willing to lie and willing to go after these resources. And they've had to adapt new strategies to sort of, try and combat these companies and these governments that are bent on doing this. The struggle for cultural reclamation, the struggle to maintain cultures, keep languages alive, practice our traditions, is fundamentally an act of resistance. So we've seen this, most recently with the case of El Sepulta. In New Brunswick, where community members, again, put their lives on the line. Their RCMP basically deployed just as militarized units as the U.S. is deploying now in Ferguson, Missouri. And really, again, this one is not just a phenomenon in Canada, it's really a worldwide sort of resistance that we're seeing right now. I've spent time working with indigenous villagers in the Amazon who are facing off against often Canadian mining companies and oil and gas companies and logging companies. They're often losing their lives to these companies. But, again, standing up and trying to defend the land, the water that they have. There's a number of court cases already taking place that could really expand that and could really push that forward even more if they're successful. And really also, I think at the end of the day, scare a lot of governments to really recognize Aboriginal rights, because this is sometimes the only thing that does, They don't necessarily recognize First Nations governments, but when the Supreme Court of Canada, old judges all get together and say, no, you have to respect them, well, that makes, I think, Stephen Harper much more scared, which